Thank you for joining today's webcast. We will be starting momentarily. Please stand by. We will begin today's webcast momentarily. Please stand by. Welcome, everyone. This is Dawn Williams, Senior Director of Conferences, Meetings, and Events for NMSDC. Thank you for joining us for today's NMSDC COVID-19 Virtual Town Hall. Just a few housekeeping items before we begin. Attendees have been muted and will be in listen-only mode for the duration of this webinar. If you have any questions for our speakers during the presentation, please type them in the Q&A box in your Zoom control panel. Our moderator will bring them up during the presentation, and we will also have time for questions and answers at the end. The chat box should only be used for troubleshooting, technical and administrative support items. Please use the Q&A box for questions for our panelists. Today's session is being live streamed and can be accessed through the NMSDC's YouTube channel or on Facebook. It will also be recorded, and the video will be available within 48 hours after the conclusion of this virtual event. They can be viewed on nmsdc.org/townhall. Finally, be sure to stay tuned to the end of this session to learn more about other upcoming events designed to develop, connect, and advocate for minority businesses and the corporations that support them. Momentarily, we will be joined by President and CEO of NMSDC, Adrienne Trimble, to kick off our discussion.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're really thrilled to bring you one of our next town hall series here. This is the 5th series that we've offered in our White House session. It's the 5th and final session. So we're glad that we have special guests here today that can answer some of our most pertinent questions. And we're really grateful that we have our MBEIC leadership. That's the Minority Business Enterprise Input Committee leaders across the country that will also participate in the discussion, as well as our president and CEO of our Capital Regions Minority Supplier Development Council. We wanted to make sure that we were getting all of the information and making sure the voice of our constituents was being heard today, so they will participate in our discussion as well. Last week, our discussion focused on the CARES Act, and we want to make sure that we thank those who participated. Congresswoman Brenda Lawrence of Michigan's 14th Congressional District, Chris Von Hollen, U.S. Senator of Maryland's 8th Congressional District, and Chris Pilkerton, White House Policy Advisor and former Acting Administrator of the U.S. Small Business Administration. And of course, we'd like to thank our special partner, Don McNeely with NBN Minority Business News, for sponsoring our post-editing, post-video edits. And if you missed it and weren't able to join us last week, you can always catch it on our website at nmsdc.org. So thank you so much. And we're really glad to kick this off. For those of you who may not be as familiar with NMSDC, again, I'm Adrienne Trimble, President and CEO. The National Minority Supplier Development Council has 23 affiliate councils across the country, and our goal is quite simple. We connect corporate America with our certified minority businesses. We have 4 key elements to our mission, which is to provide certification to minority businesses, which serves as the gold standard so that those who are doing business with our constituents, they know that we have taken them through a rigorous process to ensure they are owned, operated, and controlled by minority entities. We also make sure that we have connection opportunities in place. Since we can't do a lot of our connections live today, we are taking advantage of technology and ensuring that those connections continue to happen virtually. We also put a lot of elements around development of our minority businesses. And of course, during this time, we're really focusing around the advocacy work that is required to ensure that our MBEs stay sustainable and positioned for operation once we get through this pandemic that the country is facing. So today, I want to make sure that we get right to the meat of it because we only have our special guest for a certain amount of time. But our focus this week is really around the economic recovery and how will our minority businesses be able to get through the crisis and be positioned for recovery along with the rest of the country. We want to make sure that we have our understanding of what legislation may be coming and what things that the administration is doing to ensure that our MBEs will not be left behind as we begin planning for recovery activities. So let's get right in. We have special guests joining us, Paula Teller, who is the Deputy Assistant to the President and Director of Strategic Initiatives for the Vice President of the United States. Mr. Teller operated as the White House liaison to the U.S. House Conservatives, to the U.S. Senate Conservatives, and to all the groups and activists of the conservative movement who are helping to advance the president's legislative agenda. Paul also advanced to Deputy Assistant to the President, Director of Strategic Initiatives for the Vice President, where he serves as Vice President Pence's liaison to the conservative movement at large. Paul earned these White House privileges after more than 16 years as a Capitol Hill staffer, including Deputy Chief of Staff and then Chief of Staff for Senator Ted Cruz of Texas, Legislative Director, Deputy Director, and then Executive Director for the Republican Study Committee, and under 7 chairmen, including Mike Pence, and professional staff at the Committee on House Administration. You've had a lot of roles and a lot of increasing responsibility. And
I'm exhausted just listening to that.
I know. So thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to open it up for you to give some opening statements before we go into the Q&A session.
Absolutely. First of all, thanks for having me today. Really a great honor to be here with you. And yes, I know time is short, so I will maybe just say a few quick opening remarks, and then let's go right to Q&A. Most importantly today, I want to hear feedback from you guys. What your concerns are, what your questions are, things you're hearing and seeing and experiencing. I've got my notepad right next to me. I'm going to be taking good notes. I do a write-up for the Vice President every night. He does read it every night because he tells me he asks for it. And so point being, anything you tell me, just know that it's going right to the Vice President today. So anyway, thanks again. I appreciate it. A couple quick things to highlight. Obviously, the administration is focused right now on the guidelines for reopening, your main topic today. We believe that as of tomorrow, May 1st, every state can reach phase 1. And if you've seen those guidelines we put out, they have these gating guidelines, meaning a state has to pass a few hurdles, in our opinion, to get to the gate. Declining cases for 14 days, hospital systems that are not overwhelmed, things like that. If those criteria are met, then we believe you can move into phase 1. And by the way, this is something I should point out. Our view in this administration is that the federal government is there to guide, to facilitate, give strategic guidance, advice, connect, communicate, that kind of thing, but not necessarily to make all the final decisions. These are, to be done at the state and local level in partnership with the private sector. So there are some folks who are saying, why don't we just kind of tell the states what to do, when to open, when to do this? That's just not been our perspective. And frankly, when we talk to Americans around this nation, there's great support for that, saying, hey, we don't want the federal government, folks sitting back in Washington, D.C., pretending that they know when it's best for businesses in, Los Angeles or Arkansas or Texas to reopen. So these are guidelines, these are suggestions. Phase 1, if a state does proceed into that tomorrow or somewhere thereabouts, basically involves a lot of the social distancing that you've been hearing about, still very small gatherings. Some businesses could open. We would advise, that the governors allow that, but again, on a limited basis and only where social distancing is possible. In other words, phase 1, you shouldn't have all your sports bars reopening because kind of by definition, sports bars exist for crowds of people to get together around screens and, high five and, whatever else once there actually is sports to watch again, live sports anyway. And so if there is social distancing possible in smaller groups, then that would be okay. There's also for phase 1 recommendations that any physical portion of a business where it naturally brings people together, sort of a congregation room of some sort, a central meeting area, central hallways, that those either not be opened or be blocked off, or be limited to only a few people at a time. Maybe even stagger when people come to work, not have everyone show up at 8:30 in the morning. See if you could stagger that. Encourage telework still for those who can. And obviously, and this is maybe the most important point, those who are still vulnerable, those should still stay isolated, stay home in phase one. That would be our recommendation. And we're gonna proceed with doing what we can from the federal government to also help people feel more comfortable to reopen their businesses, to go back to work as employees, to go back to places of business as customers and clients, things like that. And we think, and what we've heard from people is a big part of that, and this will be the last point, then we'll go to Q&A, a big part of that is testing, right? We hear a lot about that. If we increase the testing for the virus, for the antibodies, that will make more people comfortable, not only in the aggregate, kind of in the big picture, but just even on a micro basis. As you walk into a business, if you know that that business is taking steps to test its employees regularly, things like that, you as a customer or client may feel more comfortable to go in and patronize that business. So we rolled out this week that national testing strategy, which hopefully you've seen. I can get it to you if not. But basically, it's a similar approach to reopening in the sense that the federal government will take a strategic oversight role, but the actual testing will be done at the state and local level in partnership with the private sector. Rapid response plans and implementation plans done at the state and local level, so that if there are smaller outbreaks that happen as things reopen, they can immediately be controlled, locked down, monitored, that kind of thing. So with that, why don't I just leave it there and let's take comments, questions. And again, so honored to be with you today.
Great, thank you so much. And we know that this is probably an incredibly busy time for you. So we do appreciate you taking the time to chat with our folks today. I'm going to open up with a question, and I know that these folks have some detailed questions they'll ask, but I'm just going to start with just an open question. And that is, as we begin to prepare for recovery, can you tell us a little bit about what the administration is doing to ensure that minority businesses are being included as part of the recovery plan and that our businesses will not be left behind?
Absolutely. It's a huge priority for this president and for this vice president. You'll see both of them constantly mention it, which it sounds silly, but just even having it on their mind, on their tongues, we believe is a huge part of the inclusion. It's something that the president and vice president think about every day. We don't want this to be a recovery for some and not for others. They're very aware that some of the populations most hurt, not only by the virus, but by the lockdowns, have been minority communities. And therefore, they should get maybe even more attention as we reopen because of the kind of asymmetric hurt that they have felt. So yeah, it's a huge priority. It's why we're doing Zooms and calls and outreach like this. And you'll see the president and vice president mention it, think about it, bring it up in task force meetings, and make sure that these things are done. If not equally, maybe even again, prioritizing minority communities.
Excellent. Thank you for that. We're going to be on the lookout for it. It's more as more in folks. Let's go to our MBEs first, who have joined us today to ask some questions representing their constituents within their parts of the country. We'll start first with Terry Quinton. I'll ask each of you as you come on, introduce yourselves, what your business is, how long you've been in business, and then go right into your question, just so everybody knows who you are and what perspective you're bringing to asking the question. So Terry, you first.
Thank you, Adrienne. I'm happy to be here. My name is Terry Quinton. I'm with Q2 Marketing Group in Dallas, Texas. We specialize in assisting small and mid-sized businesses accelerate their business growth. I sit on the National Minority Supplier Development Council's board, as well as the Dallas-Fort Worth Minority Council's board. And thank you, Paul, for being here.
I appreciate it.
Our first question really has to do with minority businesses are leaders in our communities. We are ready and capable to do business. And as such, we're interested, the constituent group is interested in what the federal government opportunities are for us to do business. We recognize that we can work with our clients, our previous clients, but we also have large capable minority businesses ready to work with the federal government. So what kind of opportunities are there for us?
Well, fantastic, appreciate it. I think what I would invite you to do with that is just assume that really any need that the federal government talks about having, like for example, you hear a lot about ventilators, right? The national stockpile of ventilators. You hear about how we're stockpiling masks and we're going after pharmaceutical opportunities and shields for businesses to for employees to wear and things like that. Anything that you hear mentioned that is essential to the recovery and essential to making people feel comfortable coming back into a place of business, there's the opportunity there, no question. What I know I do even personally in my role as outreach for the vice president, constantly getting emails, texts, things like that of opportunities. I'm saying, hey, we can do this. Here's a one pager. Here's an email. Here's some contact information of a person who could do that. And what we do is, I personally pass it into we have an internal review system that says, hey, is this legit? Is this good stuff? Is this something we should follow up on? If yes, then that goes out to the various federal agencies that might be looking to procure those materials, again, either for some sort of national stockpile or even just working with private sector partners and saying, hey, the federal government may not be purchasing this, but we know the private sector folks who are, or the state and local government folks who are, and we pass it along that way. So that's a long way of saying, feel free to pass stuff in through me or other contacts you've got, and we will check out every opportunity there.
Great, thank you. And thank you, Terry, for your question. Next up, we have Carlton O'Neill. Again, Carlton, introduce yourself, your business, and then ask your question.
Yes, thank you, Adrienne. And also, again, thank you, Paul, for spending time with us today. It's so important to have your ear for the things that we want to talk about with you. My name is Carlton L. O'Neill. I am one of the managing partners and the chief operating officer for Lightspeed EDU Incorporated. Lightspeed has been in business for 18 years, and we are known for creating high velocity learning and expressive communication. So that's e-learning and multimedia. And also, I'm the secretary to the National MBE Input Committee. So Paul, my question for you today is around this concept of cash flow is king. You're probably familiar with that term. And as we think about reopening the country and having our MBEs starting to do more business, what is the potential to get federal support for the federal contracts and the primes to pay our MBEs net 7 as opposed to net 14 or perhaps even net 30? That will really accelerate that cash flow and get them back on their feet faster.
Interesting on that one. I'll have to admit, I am not quite sure, but you'll see my eyes drop because I'm looking at my piece of paper, clicking my pen and writing this down. To be honest, I'm not quite sure of the answer of that, but I can check it out and get back to you. Also, your next speaker, Jerron Smith with the Office of American Innovation. We're great allies, great friends. We worked together many, many years ago at the Republican Study Committee. That was part of my bio in the intro. He may have an answer for that too, so possibly ask him. But if he doesn't know either, we'll both get back to you. Good question.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. All right, next up we have Bonnie Nitsch. I always say your name wrong, Bonnie, so please correct me and make sure it's pronounced correctly, but introduce yourself and your business. You're on mute, Bonnie. Can we unmute Bonnie?
Unmuting, there we go. Thanks so much. Good afternoon. My name is Bonnie Neist, and I'm president and CEO of Fidget Branding. We're a B2B growth marketing agency with a brand forward approach to strategy, inbound and outbound marketing, sales enablement, and design. We've been in business more than 25 years. I currently serve as vice chair on the National Minority Business Enterprise Input Committee for NMSDC and served for 4 years as member of the board of directors and as Regional MBE Input Committee Chair for the Southern California Minority Supplier Development Council. My question is, how does the government's plan for restarting the economy impact the 8A, SBE, and DBE programs? Specifically, will those programs be protected or even extended during this time? And will there be mandates or incentives for federal agencies to do business with them?
As far as I know, they will be no change. As far as I know, I haven't heard anything different. Those are still priorities. No changes coming from Congress. Certainly not from the administration. So yeah, I think you can take comfort in that. Absolutely.
Any incentives as far as to federal agencies to do business with them during this time?
frankly, other than just our rhetoric, and I don't mean that in a negative way, I mean the president constantly mentioning it, and you've heard him mention it at various press conferences, that I think maybe is our best incentive, just our president encouraging through his words and his partnerships that way at task force meetings and press conferences and stuff like that. I haven't heard of anything legislatively coming through the pipeline though.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right, thank you, Bonnie. And next up, we have a designation for our corporate, for our minority businesses that have been sponsored by a corporation because of their ability to do contracts nationally, and we call that Corporate Plus. Our Corporate Plus member, Sue Bhatia, is here with us today. So Sue, would you introduce yourself and then be prepared to ask your question?
Yes, thank you, Adrienne. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank the White House NMSDC for this opportunity to have this discussion today. It's an honor to represent the mid-sized companies of this country. My name is Sue Bhatia, and I'm the chairwoman and founder of Rose International. I've dedicated the last 27 years of my life raising a family in St. Louis, Missouri, and building a successful staffing company serving America's workforce needs. Rose has been responsible for getting America back to work to the tune of over 10,000 workers every year, engaging with Fortune 500 and state governments. Today, we operate in all 50 states, and our focus is 100% on putting America back to work. And Rose International has even partnered with the White House for the 2018 initiative called Pledge to America's Workers. So in this difficult COVID-19 situation, Rose International is feeling the effects of the economic downturn, as all of us are. And there are thousands of companies like us, a few that I've even spoken to that fall into this category, that have not been addressed or supported by Congress's stimulus efforts. The stimulus efforts have addressed small businesses and very large businesses. The mid-sized companies, such as Rose International, have not had any stimulus funding. This mid-sized category represents a critical segment of the American economy and cannot be ignored. If you use Rose International as an example, stimulus money would position us in the best way possible to keep us at the forefront in our combined mission to get America back to work. Rose has successfully pivoted to work-at-home model and remains fully committed to meeting the future head-on. I'm looking forward to a spirited discussion today. And with that, I'll ask my question from you, Paul. And, we're all anticipating a bounce back at some point at the end of this. And when that happens, our mission will be to get Americans back to work quickly and efficiently. America's staffing companies, such as Rose International, put people back to work in a matter of days when traditional hiring practices take weeks, sometimes months. So Rose International and other mid-sized companies want to be ready to meet this hiring needs of our country and when that moment arrives. Is there an opportunity to partner with the White House, like we did with the Pledge to America's Workers, to make sure we recover from this downturn as quickly as possible?
Most definitely. We will need your help and the help of others like you. And first of all, let me thank you for making that initial point. We've heard that from a lot of folks, right? That the stimulus, the relief, the aid focused on small businesses and very large, but you're right, there was a big swath of businesses in the middle that got, I don't know if the word is ignored, but we're not as helped as others. And that's unfortunate because you're right, very, very important segment of the economy that you just referenced. We will absolutely need your help, no question. What I would actually, if you don't mind, I mean, respond by also asking you a question. What do you think the challenges are? You were saying normally you could staff people, 2 to 3 days, you can get them placed. Do you see that still being the case under COVID, or will, should we as the federal government expect staffing even for open businesses to take longer than, we've become used to in the past? What do you think?
That's a great question, Paul. We are actually capable to do it as fast as before. So
Okay.
when our engine is up and running, our people are working at home as efficiently and even more productive than before.
Yeah.
because they don't have to get ready and drive to work.
Right.
Activity has certainly increased for us. However, our clients, which is a lot of corporate America, are all feeling very cautious at this time in their spending and really realigning with the changes that are going on. And we did not have a lot of airline clients, but we did have one where they couldn't afford to keep any of the workforce. But then, that's the beauty of being diversified and having access to such a range of different industries in our portfolio that, we're very well diversified. That helps a lot. So our clients, I feel, are really cautious at this time, and the slowdown is really coming from their realigning their initiatives. So our volume, we are seeing it down quite a bit, but again, like I said, the capability remains strong and we're able to ramp up as soon and as quickly as needed.
That's great. And so you think, though, that there are people waiting to be placed. There's just not necessarily places to put them at this moment, as opposed to not enough people even waiting to be placed.
In fact, we have much larger pool of talent available now to choose from.
That's great.
So, and we've been upskilling and reskilling and getting people ready to work for higher level positions. And as automation takes over and more jobs get automated right after this, I feel like we're very well positioned to bring jobs back, and we're at the forefront of that. And I feel like corporate America and the economy needs the staffing engine and the staffing companies like ourselves. And we're mid-sized. We grew from scratch from the basement of my home to where we're hiring 10,000 every year. So this is something that we have to preserve and certainly make sure that it continues. So that's why I brought that question up.
No, I appreciate it. And this is something I'll say to really any participant on the Zoom today. Let us hear that message more, that people are ready to get back to work, because believe it or not, we hear from a lot of people that even if you open the businesses tomorrow, folks won't come back. People are scared, and they are. We understand there many are, but to hear that there are plenty of people, maybe even more, as you were saying, ready to jump right back in, I think that will give us encouragement to push forward on our reopening guidelines. Maybe even encourage some states to move along a little faster, things along those lines. So any of these stories, anecdotes would be hugely helpful for us to hear.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Our next question is going to come from the president and CEO of the Capital Regions Minority Supplier Development Council, our affiliate in the Washington, D.C. area, Sharon Pender. Sharon, you want to just talk a little bit about your footprint for your council and then ask your question?
I think I'm still muted. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Madam President, for that. I am Sharon Pender, and thank you, Paul. Again, I joined the chorus of people thanking you for your time, because we know there's plenty of things that's keeping you up at night. And so we appreciate the opportunity of being here. Again, I'm Sharon Pender. I'm President and CEO of the Capital Region Minority Supply Development Council, servicing the state of Maryland, the District of Columbia, Northern Virginia. I know that President Trimble talked about what we do, but I have 22 other colleagues across the country as affiliate councils. We're the boots on the ground as it relates to providing services to our corporate and government members and our MBEs, and we are experts in our respective markets. I am also am the operator of 2 centers funded by the U.S. Department of Commerce MBDA Center. I have the MBDA Business Center, Washington, D.C., and the MBDA Federal Procurement Center, the only one of its kind in the country. And so I also happen to sit right now on one of the task force for Governor Hogan. So I understand what you were talking about earlier relative to the states making decisions about recovery. But there's an old economic adage that says, when America catches cold, minority businesses catch pneumonia. And one thing this pandemic has really shown us is that gap between health and wealth. And so I'm glad to hear that you have your conversations with the administration and that they understand that there has to be something here. But I heard today that the federal guidelines on social distancing expires tonight. And so if we would we could fast forward a couple of months, and you hear all kinds of things, but sobering medical minds expect that due to recovery process, whatever the reason, some of our states will experience a spike again in the fall. So my question is, what is the administration's plan B? How is the country prepared to deal with that? And how is the administration prepared to help with that?
We can hear you now. Oh, no, we can't. I think he's back on mute.
There we go. Okay, sorry about that. Not sure what I hit, but the wonders of technology. Anyway, thanks for that. Yeah, Plan B. By the way, I should also emphasize that at the stroke of midnight tonight, it doesn't mean we're saying, go back to your big parties, everyone, get together in big hugs and think, not at all, not at all. In fact, as we were saying before, if you look at the reopening guidelines and the phases, we do talk very much about social distancing in phase one. So even when we recommend a state move into phase one, part of that are still small gatherings if necessary. Teleworking, meaning if you don't have to be near other folks, maybe you shouldn't just yet. The vulnerable being isolated, and again, even even when you return to businesses, practicing strict social distancing would be our recommended requirement, especially for things like restaurants, sit-down restaurants, gyms, things like that. That are we would say if they're not practicing social distancing, if they're not practicing very robust sanitizing practices, then maybe it's not time for them to open yet. So check out those guidelines. But no, we very much recognize that there could be some sort of a bounce back in the fall, like any virus. When the weather gets cold again, it may take a break in the summer and come back in the fall. And so that's why I think such things as the stockpile, like we were talking about before, bringing on equipment now, anticipating possible larger needs in the fall, working with states and localities for rapid response plans. So if there starts to be pop-up outbreaks in different locations, you can immediately jump to it and try to lock it down, keep it local instead of spreading back into some sort of national outbreak. And so, yeah, this is going to be a constant monitoring, constant partnership with the states, with localities, and again, most importantly, the private sector. The business imprint will be so important. And this administration relies on that so much because we know that's where the innovation is, that's where the creativity is, that's where things actually get done, right? Government maybe can move things around, move money around, but ultimately it's the private sector that makes it happen. So we're gonna be partnering that way as we go forward. But check out those reopening guidelines.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Thank you
so much. So thank you to all the panelists who asked their questions. I think it's very important that we get the perspective of the different parts of the country, different size businesses, different industries, so that you can understand the vast majority of the businesses that we represent as a network. So this is just a sampling of them, but you can see they go across the scale. Our chat room has been just lighting up with questions. So I'm going to ask you one that seems to be a recurring theme that perhaps you could answer for us. And that is that as we've seen in the news, that a lot of large companies have received bailouts because of the impact to their industries. What is the federal government planning to do to ensure that inclusion continues to be at the forefront so that those who have been bailed out, such as the Lakers getting funding and the airlines and things of that nature, how do we ensure that they continue to do business with minority entities so that all of us continue to prosper and be a part of the economic recovery?
Absolutely fantastic question. I think, first of all, don't underestimate the importance of you guys reminding us constantly. In other words, keep bringing that up to our forefront. But we won't need much reminding. It's something that is already top of mind for us. This president, this vice president strongly feel it. I personally feel it. Your next speaker, Jerron Smith, feels it, and so many others throughout the White House. Ivanka, Jared, so many others put minority outreach, minority inclusion, business entrepreneurship as such a priority. Like I said, that's why we do these kinds of outreach calls and Zooms and things like that. It's important to us. But I would say overall, the even better answer is we want to get the entire economy roaring again. And this president feels like when what's the phrase? Rising tide lifts all boats. If we can get this tide back up, if we can get this economy roaring again, that in and of itself will get things back open, get people back to work, spur innovation, and include all folks including and especially minority enterprises in that rising tide, in that resurgence, kind of the great American comeback. And we really look forward to that.
Excellent. We're still waiting for Sharon to join us. Hopefully you have
I'm a little late for my 3:30 call, but let's do one more, then I'll drop off. Okay.
As you know, the second round of the PPP funding is out now, and we're still trying to work with our businesses to get access. And unfortunately, they're still having some struggles with getting access to the funds, getting response back from some of the large banks. Have there been any additional conversations with the lenders to ensure that the smaller businesses, the mid-sized businesses can get access to this funds because they're still struggling to get funded through the PPP stimulus package?
Absolutely. We hear those concerns a lot, and we are constantly relaying them to the SBA, the Treasury Department, our private partners, private sector partners, banks, the lenders, that kind of thing. It's something that we're aware of, we're very concerned about, not happy about it. And we keep having those conversations and making sure that the lending is done fairly and not just, some folks picking friends, right, in terms of who they loan to. So we're very much relaying those concerns, but keep those coming in because it's good to hear the exact details, the exact stories, especially if there are locations or certain banks that are particular problems. So please let us know.
Well, thank you. And we do have all size companies represented here, other Corporate Plus members. We have one of ours in the audience who's been trying to get through, but we can't figure out how to unmute her. So Janice Howard Bryan, I'm so sorry I can't get your question. She's the owner of
unmuted.
Oh, you are muted. Okay, I think you can.
Hey, Hammer.
Good question.
Am I on?
Hey, Paul, how are you? Thanks.
How's it going?
Wonderful. Thanks for the work you're doing.
Hello.
And I've been working with Nicole as well, Nicole Fraser. I'm looking forward to the next speaker. But before you leave, I do want to urgently echo what my friend Sue from Rose was saying.
Okay.
Our organization is a multi-billion-dollar staffing and solutions company. I need to talk directly with you about how we can offer solutions through and to the federal government. And we've got some specific initiatives that I'd like to share with you. So please, if you'll connect with me, I'd really like to talk with you about that. Very many years of investment and knowledge exist within NMSDC. And as a Corporate Plus member, I like to think that we're one of their prize organizations and award winning, so we can definitely work with you. Being quite specific, please get in touch with me. You have my info. I'm gonna get in touch with you. Or would you like me to go through Nicole to reach you? What's easiest?
Either way, whatever's best for you. In fact, again, I fortunately have to run, but as I sign off, I should say, if there are questions you wanted to get answered from the Vice President's office, me specifically, whatever, yes, please feed them in through our hosts today, and they can get it to me. I'll get you answers or get you to the person who can get you the best answer. But I was so encouraged to hear what you guys were saying about the staffing issues, because like I said, unfortunately, we hear too much from the naysayers that people are too scared and they're going to stay in their homes and not come out. So to hear that you folks are ready to get folks back to work, back into business is so encouraging. And we want to partner with you and work with you more on that.
Well, also, let me just say this because it's urgently important. When we are working both in full-time, but especially in statement of work and temporary work, these are workers who are not often covered by the full-time offered programs.
Right.
And so it's critical that we are able to continue to service, because we are the employment masters for this large and growing population. We've got a lot of graduates and we've got a lot of people rethinking education as well. So not only are they future voters, they're current workers. And we have a great opportunity to employ a vast number of people. We need to work together.
Great point. Look forward to it. And thank you again for all the comments, questions today, and look forward to more. Look forward to ongoing collaboration and contact. And again, great honor to have been included today. I know you'll be handled well by my good friend, longtime colleague, Sharon Smith, who I think is coming on very soon.
Great. Thank you so much, Paul. We appreciate your time today. And I believe Sharon has joined us. Hello, Sharon. How are you?
Okay. I'm doing just fine. So I've been on the call. I've heard about 3 of Paul's questions. And so a lot of those questions I can speak directly to, because that's literally going to be the work of the council working with stakeholders like yourself to help recover and open back up the country and more than ever grow minority businesses like they've never been grown before. Just to kind of give you some background, last week, the president announced that the White House Opportunity and Revitalization Council, chaired by Secretary Carson, would lead the efforts, focus its efforts on recovery for underserved communities and minority communities. What that means is this council, which once worked to create opportunity across the nation, will now use its cross-agency resources to help underserved communities and communities of color flourish. We've developed 3 different work groups: economic and entrepreneurship work group, a work group for workforce and education, and a work group on what we're calling safety and community empowerment. The last piece also includes elements dealing with the public health and helping people who have been, people in the African American community that have health disparities, and creating the right partnerships to help us do all 3 of these tasks. So between local leadership on the state level and organizations like National Minority Supplier Diversity Council, I think we can work to create strategies that are very localized in nature and deal with local needs. One thing that we've worked through this week was the PPP program. We were able to open up more lines by expanding the amount of CDFIs that are able to access the program. Having CDFIs a part of this program was something that we pushed for the second tranche. And even yesterday, from 4 p.m. to midnight, the lending was only for those lending institutions under $1 billion. And that opened it up for a lot of our businesses to get access to resources. And then even tonight, we're having SBA through Ashley Bell is hosting a joint conference call with a number of different African-American leaders to talk about the different private sector resources that are available to get access to loans. And over the next week, we hope to follow up with this coalition with EDA to talk about the $1.5 billion in resources that they'll have, and we'll be able to leverage those resources for small businesses that weren't able to access the small business program. And so we're trying to be very intentional here. I think today we also announced investments into historically Black colleges and universities. And so next week we're doing a call with a number of those universities to make sure that they're not having any issues with accessing the money from the Department of Education. But essentially we have all hands on deck. This Friday, tomorrow we'll do a call with all the deputy secretaries and go over the individual work groups. And by the end of the next week, when we have a meeting with all the secretaries, we'll get recommendations from them to send to the president and have a meeting with the president. But I'm just so appreciative of Adrienne and the coalition that we have on the phone. And we hope to partner with you all throughout the way. And as we try to come up with recommendations, we want to be able to use the resources that we currently have. We want to partner with state and localities to also leverage their resources. But we also want to have a joint strategy as we make recommendations to Congress on what would help us create a partnership and help revitalize our communities and get our small businesses as strong as ever. And so I would love to take questions and phone calls on all the above. There's a lot of information flow, and we want to continue to educate and learn from all of you, because from our first set of calls that we did over the last couple of weeks, that helped us get the carve out for the PPP program. And so we literally are taking some of your consultation and some of your thoughts on policy and putting that into action. So these forums have been very helpful. And it was a treat to also be on the call with Paul. I used to work with Paul, work on the same team in Congress. And we also worked on the same team in the White House. We both were on the Legislative Affairs team at some point in time. And having him over in the Vice President's office is going to be extremely important to some of our efforts. I've developed a great relationship with the vice president and their team. It's a team that's willing to really move the needle for communities of color. In fact, about 3 weeks ago, the vice president was able to address a number of our leaders, and more of that will be to come. And so with that said, I'd love to take some questions.
All right, Sharon, thank you so much for being here. We know that you are incredibly busy as well. I want to make sure that I give the audience your background so they'll understand the role that you play and how instrumental you've been in helping to ensure that minority businesses are at the forefront of the stimulus package. So I'm going to read just some highlights from Jerron's bio, just so you guys can understand the type of roles that he has. He serves as a deputy assistant to the president for the White House Office of American Innovation. He also spearheads initiatives such as criminal justice reform, workforce development, opportunity zones, and others. We've been having conversations for quite a while now around a lot of these issues. Prior to his role as deputy assistant to the president, he served as special assistant to the president in the Office of Legislative Affairs. He was the president's liaison to United States House of Representatives Ways and Means Committee, Agricultural Committee, Education and Workforce Committee, Homeland Security Committee, Congressional Black Caucus, and Congressional Hispanic Caucus. When he was in that role, he was instrumental in policy negotiations and served as a catalyst in policy reform. A policy and congressional connoisseur, Jerron has played a dynamic role in policy development and social change in the DC metropolitan area through his service in the nonprofit and political sectors. And as evidenced by his personal and professional commitments, Jerron was most recently awarded the 2020 Bipartisan Justice Award. He is a graduate of Howard University School of Business and Howard University School of Divinity. So Jerron, thank you so much for all that you're doing to ensure, again, that communities of color are included in the work that the White House is doing in this administration. I want to say a personal thank you for the work that you're doing with HBCUs, being an HBCU alum myself from Wilberforce University. That's very important. Amen. So thank you for your focus there. And you're right, we've had conversations, we spoke just yesterday as we talk about making sure that the voice of the minority business owner is at the forefront and you understand what those challenges are. Before we turn it over to the panel, can you just kind of set the stage? What is it that you would like to gain from our MBEs today while we have you on the line? What do you want to hear from them?
Well, the big thing is you all have, we worked really closely with MBDA, the Minority Business Development Agency. That agency was created through an executive order under the Nixon administration. And it's our view at the White House that we want to bring that agency up to date to the challenges of the 21st century. And so if we had the ability to make reforms and to grow that agency, I would love to learn more about what that would look like. But more importantly, I think it's extremely important that not only we help our businesses survive the pandemic, but help them thrive in the future. And part of that is creating ecosystems where you all can thrive. And so I would love to learn how we can help be more targeted in specifics with creating these ecosystems across the country so that more minority businesses can flourish.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So let's get right to the question. So again, we're going to start with Terry. Terry, you're going to please ask your question, but introduce yourself again so that Jerron understands your business and the perspective that you bring as you pose your question.
Sure. Thank you, Adrienne. Again, my name is Terry Quinton. I'm with Q2 Marketing Group. I'm the CEO of Q2 Marketing Group. We specialize in helping small and mid-sized businesses accelerate their business. So we spend a lot of time actually working with small, mid-sized businesses across the country using marketing to help make them bigger and better and connecting them to their clients. I sit on the board of the National Minority Supplier Development Council, as well as the Dallas-Fort Worth Minority Development Council, and I'm out of the Dallas, Texas area. So one, we're happy to have you here with us. And we're interested in a couple of things. I would say that thank you to the work that you've done to carve out to make sure that CDIFs and credit unions and smaller entity banks actually are part of this process. The problem for a number of our MBEs, our minority business owners, however, who put in applications early on, day one, is they put it in with these larger banks and still have not heard or been prioritized or been able to get any information. And we've been told it's not wise to take your application and just run over and put applications into a community bank while you still got one in with a big bank. So how can you help us figure out the best way for our minority businesses to utilize the community banks in today's environment?
Sure. So, I mean, we've spent the last couple of days on phone calls encouraging more minority-owned businesses to use these CDFIs and credit unions, just because we saw that being an issue. I would love to follow up with you specifically on entities that have applied with bigger banks, and is it a good best practice to reapply? There may be some merit to that, but I want to make sure I have. I don't want to give you something that's breaking protocol. I will say some people have done that. I have heard that some folks have done that and been successful as a result of it. But I don't want to encourage everyone on the call to do just that. But I will certainly look into it. I also think that we have to be even more intentional. If there's businesses that have been left out, we want to look at other ways to skin the cat. And one thing I'm looking at now with a webinar with this group is for those businesses that didn't get a chance to access the SBA PPP program, we want to do a call with EDA to see if there's opportunity to access some of their resources, because they are about to put out their resources for loans for small businesses as well. And some of their parameters is around, if you didn't apply for SBA and you can't get access to a loan from a bank, they want to be like a stopgap. And so that next week we hope to roll that out as they NOFO come to completion, and we'll work with this coalition to do that.
Great, thank you, Jerron, appreciate that. Our next question is going to come from Carlton O'Neill. So Carlton, again, introduce yourself, your business, and then pose your question.
And also thank you, Jerron, also for spending time with us today and for your commitment to minority businesses. Minority businesses are part of that backbone of America. Now, when it comes to who I am, I'm Carlton L. O'Neill. I'm one of the managing partners and chief operating officer for Lightspeed EDU Incorporated out of beautiful Hamden, Connecticut. And Lightspeed is an e-learning and multimedia firm. So what we've been known for is producing high velocity learning and expressive communications. And I'm also the secretary to the National MBE Input Committee. And I have to say that I also hail from an HBCU. I'm out of North Carolina Central University out of beautiful Durham, North Carolina. So when it comes to my question, Jerron, I believe you were on the phone when we were talking about some of the larger banks and the fact that they received a lot of funding. Even this morning, I was just looking at a list of the larger banks who were distributing funding to the larger companies. And even this morning, I was looking at a report of over 200 publicly traded companies who received money, 10 million, 20 million, $30 million. So when it comes to my question, I really want to know, what are your thoughts about the fact that some of those companies are, as we say, doing the right thing and returning some of those dollars? So what are your thoughts about reallocating some of those returned dollars specifically to the minority businesses? Because if you look at it and just take a look at maybe, let's say $40 million that got returned from some of their bigger companies, $40 million could cover 1,600 minority businesses at $25,000 a piece, 800 at $50,000 a piece. And if we get more of those large businesses that are publicly traded to return more of those dollars, there could be more money that could be directly allocated to minority businesses. So when I think of your creative strategies and your desire to look for solutions, that could be one. So please share your thoughts on that.
Sure. It definitely is an interesting idea. It's something that I can certainly circle back with Treasury and Administrator Carenza to get some feedback on what that is and how. I mean, I'm certainly sure they have a strategy on how they're managing that money, but I can be very specific and see if it's going to minority-owned firms. I know that Administrator Carenza and Secretary Mnuchin have been very lightning focused on making sure that minority businesses have access to this money. And so they may welcome that. And I will say also, I'm hearing from many of the CDFIs that there has been definitely a drastic increase of minority-owned firms getting access to capital since we've set aside the $30 billion, and then more importantly, kind of opened up avenues where only those institutions were able to lend. And so, well, we're aggressively starting to really move the needle. And the truth of the matter is even the PPP program is, it's like a stopgap for maybe a short run, and we're going to have to do a lot more work immediately after this to get our economy back roaring. And so I just want to keep that in mind. And as you have other ideas that we should address, I've heard a couple different strategies, with NBDA and having some type of fund or revolving fund of $10 million that can be leveraged for minority-owned businesses. All of those things are on the table, and we certainly are interested in working with Congress to see if we can get some other solutions for this pipeline of capital to the businesses that need it.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Carlton, for that question. And as most of our audience members know, we do have our own business consortium fund, and we're also trying to position to be that bridge for our minority businesses. So we can maybe figure out ways to help you get a little bit more creative to address some of that money coming back in and how we can utilize it. So we'll keep talking about that.
Okay.
Next, we have Bonnie Niges, who will introduce herself, her company, and then ask her question.
Good afternoon, Sharon. My name is Bonnie Neist, and I'm president and CEO of Fidget Branding. We're a B2B growth marketing agency here in Los Angeles with a brand-first approach to strategy, inbound and outbound marketing, sales enablement, and design. We've been in business for more than 25 years. I currently also serve on the National Minority Business Enterprise Input Committee for NMSDC as a vice chair. And I've also served with the local Southern California Minority Supplier Development Council as a board member and as the regional MBEIC chair. My question to you, we talked about MBEs who've been sort of left behind, and with the number that we've heard of approximately 1.7 million leftover loan applications from the first round, and with this second wave of the program moving very quickly, and we'll probably run out of money, what happens next? I know we want MBEs to thrive, but we're still in survival mode for a lot of our MBEs. Will there be another round of stimulus? And if so, what do you see will be the emphasis for that funding?
So that's a very good question. I think that even with this second round that we just passed, that was something the president really pushed for. That's something that we have to work through with Congress. I know the Senate is back next week. We are getting ready. We're prepared to act. But I can't tell you with certainty that when it's going to happen. But my instincts tell me something has to happen because, like I said before, it's a stopgap, and that's why I'm reaching out to you all and taking recommendations. And so if you have thoughts on what things we should focus on, we would love to work with you to get some recommendations across the finish line that are bipartisan and that we can get the Senate and the House both to support. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does.
Yeah. So I could probably take one more question. I have to go to a 4 o'clock call.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to then shift quickly to our president of the Capital Region Minority Supplier Development Council, Sharon Pender, and allow her to ask the question on behalf of our affiliate presidents. Sharon?
And again, thank you for what you do. And I've got to get the HBCU thing in there for Morgan State University. But I also have, along with the council, and I talked about this earlier, I also have 2 MBDA centers. And so when you have the MBDA Business Center of Washington, D.C. and the Federal Procurement Center. So I'm happy to hear the conversation about MBDA, and perhaps under this administration, we can move it forward to actually codify it. And that would just be a wonderful kind of thing, but also to use it along with NMSDC as a point of perhaps distributing funds directly to those businesses that perhaps will not be able to take advantage of the PPP or EIDL or any of those loans for the variety of reasons. So to do that for that reason as well, and to perhaps take a triage approach, right? And that could be a process by which we identify who needs immediate needs, because a lot of times the data that we have isn't real time enough, and then make a prioritization of those in needs and getting the money to them, and using us, NMSDC and MBDA as channels for that, and then identifying what those critical industries are. Because historically, the government has provided support for industries in critical need, whether it has been transportation, the airlines, or any of those kinds of things. So I think we can take advantage of doing that for sure.
Sure, and I'm certainly open to all of those ideas. Let me end with these three things. Definitely, I think we're very supportive of codification, and we want to build out what that looks like. Because if we're going to codify it, let's do it in a robust way. Second thing, we're very aware of wanting to open up more contracting opportunities. We think that the current cap that's in place needs to be updated for 21st century businesses. You know, many of you hit that cap pretty quickly, and it prevents you from being able to access contracting. That would be important. A third thing is supply chain. One thing we learned from the pandemic is that we need more American manufacturing, and we want more minority businesses from manufacturing and being part of that supply chain. And so you have the commitment there. And then lastly, I will say that it's really about ecosystem building. And mentoring the pipeline of individuals who want to do startups. And so we want to incubate that at our historically Black colleges and minority serving institutions, and then in underserved communities. And so I would love to partner with you all on all aspects of that. And that's going to be a subject of conversation over the next couple of weeks, because I think now is the time that we create that infrastructure to solve for those issues so that all Americans have the chance of the American dream. So thanks so much for your time, by the way.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Jerron. We appreciate all that you're doing, and we look forward to continued discussions and partnerships with this administration. Have a great day, and thanks so much for being in touch.
Thank you, Adrienne. You have a nice one. All right, bye.
Thanks. All right, before everybody drops off, thank you guys so much for your questions and for being that voice of the minority business community. One question I did want to pose, I thought it was something that came up that was really interesting. And Sue, I want to kind of get your perspective on this. And that is when we talk about getting workers ready to go back into the workplace, what are some things that you're hearing from employers and some of our MBEs should be prepared for as they start to reach back out to employees to get them back engaged in the workforce? Can you talk just a little bit about what some of the strategies are that you're using and what you would advise for other MBEs?
Yes, so because of the changing work environment, corporations are scrambling to get a lot of their employees in a work at home situation. And that takes time. For very large companies, there's a lot of work that goes behind the scenes. So that takes some momentum to build up to really getting that done successfully. But as far as MBEs, I think we have opportunity. This downturn ends and there is a recovery starting. I feel like there'll be a lot of opportunity for MBEs, especially in technology, because everything's going to be automated at a faster pace than ever before. And large companies are always looking for those solutions. So I hope that answers your question.
It does. It does. Yeah. It does. And I guess I have just a couple more questions I would like to ask. And this one is for Carlton specifically. Carlton, you have changed your business structure or platform or focus over a number of years that I've known you, because I knew you back in my Toyota days and I've watched your company grow. Have you heard from other MBEs who have pivoted their business during this time, and can you share what they found to be successful and how they've been able to continue reaching out to corporations and ensuring that they are able to market their new products and services? I'd like your perspective, and then maybe Terry's.
Yes, and thanks for asking that question, Adrienne, because I have spoken to a few MBEs who have pivoted their business a little bit. Some of them are following the lead of large corporations. For example, I know some who are moving more into the PPE world, being able to provide those solutions that are needed. And you hear us say all the time that MBEs are innovative. So if you present a challenge, believe me, an MBE will find a way to step up to it. So that biggest one has been the PPE world. Some are looking to bring in more materials from other places in the world. Some are looking into doing more manufacturing themselves. I remember someone, I can't think of the name of one, that did say they're switching everything that they have over to manufacturing. And there are others who are using some of their spare capacity to warehouse materials and then get the materials out into the community. And as they are doing these things, they are sharing those actions with their corporate colleagues, corporate clients. And I'm starting to hear some of the corporate clients are showing appreciation for that work by asking the MBEs, can they do other different things down the line?
Excellent, thank you. Anything you would add, Terry?
Sure, I deal a lot in the world of technology and with small, mid-sized technology companies, and many have pivoted, but some have actually developed some amazing services. And we're looking at helping them connect with corporate America through Zoom and video at the moment, because you can't go in and talk to the buyer directly about your solutions during post-COVID. One thing I would have asked Paul that I think is of interest that we might want to take forward from an NMSDC standpoint, for many of these small, mid-sized businesses who have folks who come to the office when they're really working their normal environment, is we see the need for thermometers and ability of testing, and looking at perhaps providing for small, mid-sized businesses tax credits to invest in those kinds of things. I know large businesses are already looking to invest in it. It does take money to bring these employees back to work and into closed-in spaces. What's the possibility of getting tax credit to buy some of this stuff? So that's a question for Paul.
That's a really good.
And we have MBEs who provide these have pivoted to provide thermostats and cameras that allow you to go into where you need to work.
That is an excellent question. I would definitely take that back.
If I can make one more point, another thing I'm starting to see, more and more MBEs are looking to team and partner than ever before. I mean, I've been on so many conference calls with those who are even looking at our organization saying, yes, as Adrienne mentioned, you guys have moved from a lot of your multimedia work to more e-learning work. And as we know, online is where everything is going. So we're starting to get a lot of calls from folks saying, can we team with you since you are doing all of this work in e-learning? And those discussions are just going on and on. We'll start out with a team of 2. Next thing I know, it's a team of 5. And now we're starting to look at some of the larger government opportunities. So that's something that I also encourage more MBEs to continue to do. Look at other teaming opportunities to see how you can really go out and make a mark on the industry.
Great point. Absolutely great point.
Adrienne,
and there's we're doing from an NMSDC perspective to allow that to actually happen, those MBE to MBE connections. So thank you. Yes, Bonnie.
I was just going to say what I'm also seeing, I'm actually starting to hear from MBEs who are sort of dealing with the immediate impact of these stay-at-home orders and are now sort of thinking about when they get back to work. And they're actually starting to deal with, during this time, sort of understanding that there's a new reality of limited face-to-face engagements. And they're coming to us to talk about how do they engage online more effectively, both in terms of meetings, but also how they communicate, how they market their businesses, all of that. And then also they're dealing with the fact that they're going to have, in the future, they're going to have employees. They see it now because they're dealing with it now. Their employees could be anywhere. And they now have to have systems that don't just exist physically in an office. They have to be in the cloud, and they have to be able to know what employees are doing. They have to be able to empower them with information no matter where they are. And so they're looking for those kinds of technology solutions that will, enable their sales and marketing, and also allow them to be more productive, because they're going to be doing more with less when we all get back. Many of them, not everybody, but many of them, and they're looking for efficiencies as well.
Absolutely. We know, I keep telling people, I don't know what the new normal is. We keep saying getting back to normal. We don't know what that new normal is going to look like. It's going to be very different. And then we're just going to have to learn how to adjust to it, because you're right. I think some companies are getting used to the virtual connections, and they're looking at how that can make more efficiencies within their business structure. So something to think about.
Yes.
I want to go to Sharon for a second, because I don't know if everybody is familiar with what the Federal Procurement Center is that Sharon runs on behalf of MBDA. I think that could be a great resource that we might need to talk about. How do we leverage it as we go through this recovery period? So Sharon, can you talk a little bit more about what that center is and how it's utilized and what you think it could be, the resource and tool that it could be as we work through recovery?
Sure. And as I mentioned, it's the only one of its kind, federally funded center of its kind in the country. And basically, we have a team of experts that help clients. They are the business development arm of our minority businesses, and they help clients navigate the federal government, which is tremendous in size. And so you absolutely can leverage it in terms of understanding how to do business. What then, if I could, happens in a case of an emergency, a pandemic, right? In early March, when the president, for example, declared an emergency, and I think that they were talking about this early in terms of the state piece. Then when president declares an emergency, that FEMA gets activated, the Army Corps engineers, and what you see happening is that all those things take place at the state level. One of the things that we tell people, now was a question that you guys had asked earlier about federal contracting. If you are doing business with the federal government or want to do business with the federal government, you have to be signed up with SAMS, but there's a disaster recovery part within SAMS that you have to be registered as well. But to your point, Adrienne, these are the kinds of things that we can help people do in terms of navigating the federal government and understand what happens during the pandemic, where the opportunities are with the government, because the government hasn't shut down. It is still doing business.
Excellent, excellent. So something tells me you're going to be quite busy probably the next 6 months as folks are thinking about all the stimulus money that those agencies are going to have. And we know that there are going to be contracts that become available as a result of the stimulus money and trying to get the economy back up and running.
Right. We tell people that look at the state level. There are the local FEMAs, for example, because that stuff is pushed down to the state level. And so you also have to be able to do business with those organizations at the state level itself as well.
Excellent. Sounds like a whole new webinar that we need to have. So I like it. Yes, I think that's really helpful. Well, again, I want to thank all of you for joining us today and asking the questions and making sure that the voice of our minority businesses was heard today. We have been in regular conversations with the White House administration. Just yesterday, I was talking with Jerron and others in his office about preparing for the next round of stimulus, what it needs to look like. And they are sincere in trying to understand what the pain points are and how do we make sure that minority businesses are not left behind. So I appreciate all of you taking the time to join us today and be a part of the discussion. For everybody that joined us today, thank you for taking the time. This is our final White House session, but it will not be our last webinar. We will have more of these coming on different topics because just as everyone else is learning how to make those connections virtually, we're doing the same thing. So be on the lookout for more information. And if you were not able to catch any of our previous webcasts that we have, please go to nmsdc.org, and that's where the information will be available. We've created a new site that has captured all of our COVID-19 resources called the nmsdccares.org location. So there is a place on our website, there's a sub link that will take you to specific information regarding COVID-19, different resources, what our councils are doing on the ground to make sure that we're trying our best to help everybody position themselves through these challenging times. And then again, want to say a special thank you to Don McNeely with Minority Business News USA. Thank you for being our partner and helping us with the post-editing of these videos. I don't think people realize that these are actual productions so that we make sure that we are bringing good content to you and that we are leveraging the technology in the best way, and that it's a resource that's available for those who may want to go back and reference it, or for those who didn't even have the opportunity to join us. We want to make sure that we have the catalog of those resources available to you. If you don't see the information that you're looking for on our nmsdccares.org, please send us an email. We've put in place additional information so that we can capture whatever your questions might be so that we can respond back to you as soon as possible. So thank you so much for joining us. We will have another session continuing the conversation on Thursday, May 7th. Still working out the details of that, but stay tuned. More will be coming, and you'll be getting emails and updates from NMSDC on what the next topic will be and who our speakers will be. So again, thank you all for being with us. Stay well, stay connected, and stay healthy as the government begins to reopen. We want to make sure that you all stay healthy and stay safe. And remember, #Minority Business Matters. Thank you, everybody, and we'll talk soon.